Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Able Voices podcast. I'm Dr. Rhoda Bernard, founding managing director of the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education, and I am proud to present this podcast featuring disabled artists and arts educators. We are inviting artists with disabilities to be guest hosts for the Able Voices podcast. Today's guest host is paraathlete and musician Ella Bouvard. Ella Bouvard is a 22-year-old paraathlete and musician. Ella's main sports are triathalon, wheelchair rugby, and motorsport. Ella plays guitar and sings and gigs regularly in pubs and at festivals in the summer. Ella has been a full-time wheelchair user for 3.5 years and a musician for around 2.5 years.
Hello and welcome to the Able Voices podcast. My name is Ella Bouvard and I'm a disabled singer and guitarist based just outside of London. Today I'll be interviewing the lovely Larli Davies. Larli is an Australian musician currently studying at the Royal College of Music London. As a recorder player, she enjoys exploring music of all styles from history as well as modern music. She has a particular passion for exploring the role of disability in music as a wheelchair user of going on 5 years. So hello Larli, how are you today? And if you want to tell us anything else about yourself that I've missed, feel free.
I think you've got it all in there. Yeah, pretty good, all good today.
Cool. So I'd like to start off by asking you about your story as an artist. How did you get started and what led you to where you are today?
Big question. So I grew up in a small town just outside of a city called Newcastle on the east coast of Australia. And I came from quite a musical home. We always had music playing, but it wasn't so much classical music or anything in particular. And then my mum enrolled me in music classes when I was about 4, and I started playing lots of different instruments, and the recorder, and then the violin and the piano. But I always kind of wanted to just play the recorder, always. So I taught myself how to play the recorder for a long time. And then when I was 11, I just happened to meet a teacher through a school that I was going to, and she kind of told me, the recorder is a real instrument. You can go far with it. So I started lessons with her, and I kind of joined the local folk scene, and I played a lot of traditional music. I was in a few ensembles and bands. And then, so when I was 15, I had an infection and I lost a lot of the use of my lower body, and I had to go through all of that rehab and all of those not so fun things and kind of learn how to exist again. And throughout that, the only thing that I still had from before was my music. And so when I was going through all of those processes, I always had music to practice, and I kind of think that is one of the things that helped me kind of get life back together. And then in 2020, lockdown happened.
Much fun.
And I started online lessons with a teacher in Germany called Anna Stegman. And I sort of briefly mentioned to her that I was thinking about applying to uni to study recorder, and I kind of thought that people would laugh at me. But she was very enthusiastic and helped me with my applications. And then I ended up being offered a place and a scholarship at the RCM and moved here, and here we are.
That's so cool. So how long have you been here now?
2 years, yeah.
Very good.
Ages.
Very nice. How are you like? Did you like it? Are we a nice country to be in?
It's pretty nice. It's quite cold, but yeah.
So you sort of touched on it a bit in your answer there anyway, but you, like myself, are a full-time wheelchair user. So, I wanted to talk about how you navigate that in the world of classical music, and have you had any experiences that stand out to you, either good or bad? And another thing I wanted to touch on is obviously you played recorder pre-injury and post-injury. So if there's any sort of massive differences that you notice both before and after, then feel free to speak about those.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I mean, I don't know, but you probably from your experience as well, it's like you almost have 2 different lives. They're just so different.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that I would be a musician were it not for my injury, just because it kind of gave me an excuse, I guess, to be visible, and it kind of doesn't give you a choice in terms of standing out. And so I think sort of doing something weird, it's just the icing on the cake, really, because I'm always going to be a bit different. So I think that's one of the big kind of benefits that I've noticed, is kind of just not really caring about what other people think is normal or think of what I'm doing. Yeah, and then I think there are all of those not so fun things that come with being disabled, mostly just from society and from the accessibility within the industry, which I know is improving, but isn't necessarily at the place where I feel it should be, and often kind of leaves both myself and I know other people feeling quite isolated and alienated from the world of music and classical music, which obviously I didn't have before. So things like, just venues being so inaccessible and this kind of lack of acknowledgement of the wider issues, having difficulty getting to concert venues and that kind of thing. It's just not something that's really taken seriously. It's sort of, well, we're accessible, so like everything's done.
I'm going to jump in. One thing that I find is that a lot of places cater for disabled audiences, but not necessarily disabled artists, because they're not expecting that.
Yeah.
So,
No,
the sort of front of the house and all that stuff is completely accessible. And then you try and get on stage and they're like, oh no, there's 7 steps. And you're like,
yeah.
Great.
And it's not something they'd put on their website either, they just say, oh, we're accessible, we're so accessible.
Yeah.
Can I get on the stage? Do I have to crawl onto the stage?
Oh, don't even.
I've stopped doing that. I made a New Year's resolution last year. Stop crawling on stage. Yeah. And I've definitely kind of lost opportunities because of kind of logistical difficulties, I guess that's a big thing. Yeah. So many things, just full of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Heavy. But yeah, no, it's really interesting. And I'm glad I'm not the only one that crawls on stage.
Yes.
I just sometimes when I'm doing it, I'm thinking, oh God, everyone must think I'm so mad.
Yeah, no, I always make a thing where I can't wear skirts on stage. It's just such a weird thing, but you don't want to flash anyone as you're climbing on stage, and you never quite know if you're going to be able to get on. So always got to wear a jumpsuit. Yeah.
So, what projects have you been working on recently, or have you got lined up in the near future?
Well, I'm so busy, but when I have to say what I've got going on, it never sounds like that much. I've got a lot of concerts on at the moment. I'm doing lots of kind of contemporary music, working with composers for a few different projects within college and concerts for those. And then I've got kind of a long-term project. I'm trying to kind of collate make a database kind of disabled composers throughout history, because there's not really anything that exists like that. So that's sort of something that's happening every day behind the scenes that has not come to fruition yet. So hopefully will in the near future.
So we're going to listen to a recording of you playing, and if you could just tell me what it is, what it's about, what it means to you before we listen.
Yeah, so this is a piece for solo recorder. It was written in, I think, the early 1600s by a composer called Jacob van Eyck, who was himself a blind musician, a recorder player and a bell maker, and he was employed by his local council, rumour has it, to scare off rowdy youths from the square by improvising on popular tunes of the day. And this is called Fantasia and Echo, and it's supposed to imitate kind of the sounds of the square and the sounds of the echoes coming from above and below.
That sounds so cool. I just again, this is where, so much gets missed with disabled artists, in the past and present, which is awful because, modern day we should be hearing about them. But I don't know anything about any past disabled composers, but he sounds cool.
Yeah, there are so many. on the list.
So yeah, that was great. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And then to finish the episode, what advice would you give to other disabled musicians or artists, and anyone who might be a bit worried about getting into the industry? Just tips and tricks that you've learned along the way, that sort of thing.
So I've written in my notes, look after your shoulders, and that's all I've written. I suppose that's probably true for all manual wheelchair users, but particularly if you're going to play music, look after your shoulders. And then I think the big thing is to really embrace the idea that all the issues you're facing are not your own fault. They're the fault of the world around you, and it's the world that needs to change and not you. That's very hard to kind of internalize that, but it does happen with time, I think. And also to try and make friends, reach out to people. We met on Instagram. I think if you reach out to people, you'll realize that there are plenty of us, but there also aren't that many of us. So we kind of need to know each other and support each other and just kind of lean into it. You've got something that makes you different, and you can either let that take away from it, or you can let that add to your experience and to your art.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, for me, it's super interesting talking to, probably if we were both able-bodied, I wouldn't necessarily be talking to someone who plays recorder. I'd be talking to other singers and guitarists. So, again, it's sort of that common denominator that brings you together. So yeah, that's really cool. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you for
I've had a
having
great
me.
time. I hope you have too. And so yeah, thank you so much for joining me today, both Larli and anyone listening. And I will be hosting the next couple of episodes, so hopefully you listen to those too.
Able Voices is a production of the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education, led by me, Dr. Rhoda Bernard, the founding managing director. It is produced by Daniel Martinez del Campo. The intro music is by Kai Levin, and our closing song is by Sebastian Batista. Kai and Sebastian are students in the arts education programs at the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education. If you would like to learn more about our work, find us online at berklee.edu/BIAAE or email us at BIAAE@berklee, that's LEE.edu.